My name is Tom Evans, and I live in North Harwich, where actually I've lived since 1973, on Great Western Road, about as far south of the Mid-Cape Highway as the proposed wind turbines are north of the Mid-Cape Highway. And as I reflect on this very important and critical issue, I am concerned that we not be rushed to judgment or rushed to judgment on such a complicated matter. In the informational session that the town sponsored a couple of weeks ago, and then in town meeting a week ago, we heard a great deal of information for why we should not move forward with the wind turbine project. We heard about noise issues, concerns about flicker. We heard about wind turbine syndrome. We heard about vibroacoustic disease. There were concerns raised about the possibility of damage to wildlife, especially to birds. There were concerns raised about oil in the nacelles and whether or not these could represent a pollution threat in the zone of contribution or in a conservation area. All of these concerns are very legitimate, but they are nonetheless rather speculative. I think we need to be very careful that we pay attention to what we know, and among what we know are some of the following facts. Portsmouth Abbey School in Portsmouth, Rhode Island installed a major wind turbine on their campus close to a number of other buildings a number of years ago, and they have achieved extraordinary success in terms of financial payback. The town of Portsmouth, Rhode Island was impressed enough by the success of the wind turbine in Portsmouth Abbey that it installed its own very large wind turbine immediately off Route 25, I believe, certainly visible from the highway. And that turbine is at the edge of a parking lot that is at the edge of Portsmouth High School. The town of Portsmouth considered that turbine successful enough that I believe they have installed a second turbine. And from the Braga Bridge, as you drive over that bridge and look to the south, you can see three large turbines off in the distance. We know that Mass Maritime has installed a wind turbine on their campus, close to classrooms and close to dormitories, and that too has been a very successful installation. Most recently, a turbine has been installed at the Mass Military Reservation. I believe that's in Bourne. And probably the most recent installation on Cape Cod has been that at the Falmouth Wastewater Treatment Plant, which went into operation a couple of months ago. A week or so ago, on a very windy day, I took my own field trip to the Falmouth Wastewater Treatment Plant to see what I could learn about noise, what I could learn about flicker. I went into the wastewater treatment plant, introduced myself, and asked if I could walk up to the base of the turbine, and it was agreed that I could do so as long as I stayed on the other side of the perimeter fence. But before I took my walk, I stood in front of the facility itself, and the wastewater treatment plant chemist came and stood beside me and explained that we were standing at that point 1,000 feet from the base of the turbine. And I explained my interest, what Harwich was thinking about doing. And she said, you know, I've never even heard anything from this turbine until today. And probably the reason for that is that we've got sustained winds of 35 or 40 miles an hour. And what we heard was a very low, sustained kind of whoosh, the sound that you would hear when you have wind blowing among skyscrapers in downtown Boston, but very subdued, and certainly far less in volume than the traffic noise from Route 28 that runs by the Falmouth Wastewater Treatment Plant just to the west. I asked her if she had ever heard the term wind turbine syndrome, and she said, what? She had never heard of it. And it struck me that a facility in the town of Falmouth, which is home to perhaps two of the most preeminent scientific institutions in the world, would not be aware of wind turbine syndrome or vibroacoustic disease as it has been reported. So my concern is that we not rush to judgment, that we get the facts, and if in fact the sighting of these is important, or the distance needs to be carefully carefully adhere to, then that's fine. But let's be sure that we are, in fact, making our decisions for the town based on fact. To my knowledge, given the installations that I've just referenced, I've heard no reports that any of the individuals, the neighbors, the people who are close to those installations have been harmed physically by the installation of those turbines, and I think if that were the case, we would have known that. Maybe it's a question again of some sort of attenuation or some sort of mitigation that has been affected, and if that is required, then we should take a look at that. But as we look at sustainable and renewable sources of energy for the future, I think we need to weigh the risks. And it may well be that the risks associated with wind turbine installation are far, far fewer than the risks that we are seeing today as we deal with the recent death of 12 coal miners in Tennessee, or as we look at the environmental catastrophe that is perhaps going to unfold in the Gulf. If we have a choice between renewable energy that is clean and sustainable, and we can site it properly, then I think as we look to our energy needs, look 20 or 30 years down the road, we've got to make sure that we make good decisions and that we aren't rushed to judgment.